As I told you all before, I don't do product endorsements, so you're going to have to figure out where some of this stuff comes from, right? So anyway, a good while back, I was watching TV, and there was a show. I do that every now and then too, right? But there was a show that came on, and it was one of these shows that they always talk about food. That's kind of a hobby of mine, food, right? So anyway, this certain particular show, this guy goes around the country, and he goes to all these little different restaurants and all of that stuff, and he features all of the specialty dishes and all. He drives a little classic Camaro, puts way too many miles on it, but that's a whole different story for a different time, right? But I was enjoying the show, but he was in one of the shows, he was in New Orleans. And I said, whoa, that was close. We can actually go check that one out. So in that show, he was talking to the owner of the restaurant, and they kind of went through the guy's, I guess you could say, their experience from after the flood of Katrina, and how they were able to rebuild the restaurant and get back on their feet and get everything going again. And I tell you, I've been to a couple of places when I was working in New Orleans that have this, and a lot of the people that flooded, they have this little brass tag with a line on it, and it's the water line that they put outside right by their door so that you know where the water line was. And when we walked into that restaurant, it was just above eye level. And I'm 5'10". And they recovered from that. But the specialty sandwich that this restaurant made, it was called the Barge. And I was looking at this thing, and man, as they described it, how they put it together and all, and I said, that sounds like it would be really good. I might even, thinking about this, I might even start eating bread again to go back and get one. But anyway, on this sandwich, they have fried shrimp, fried oysters, and fried fish. And it's all mixed in, right? It's not just separate places. It's all mixed in across the whole sandwich. Now, they call it the Barge because it's a very large sandwich. Now, when we went, there was 4 adults and my grandson, who is now 14, and I think he was still in a high chair. So I'm going to say 4.5 people at the table, right? So we sat at one of the small tables, that you usually just sit 4 adults around, right? So we sitting at this small table, and the waitress came over, and I ordered the Barge. Now, we were all going to eat that one sandwich. And the waitress made the comment, she said, well, we don't usually bring them to the small tables. I said, oh, okay. She said, but we got it, don't worry. So they went off and they made it. Now, when they're getting ready to deliver the sandwich, there's a whole thing that goes with it, right? They ring a bell, like an old ship's bell or whatever from when on the river. So you ding, 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 and all of a sudden they're bringing out your sandwich. They put the sandwich, it comes out on a board. They put it cat-a-corner on the table so that it would fit. All right? So it was pretty awesome. And the 4.5 of us ate on it, and we had some left over. So we brought that home, and my son took care of that when we got home. But we think about this, and when we listen to this gospel, we think about that them loaves must have been enormous, that Jesus was able to feed that to these 5,000. Well, it says 5,000, but there was more than that, right? Because there were women and some children, and so we could say 10, 15,000 people. But a barley loaf is no bigger than a pistolette, right? So a pistolette, this is, can you imagine feeding 10,000 people on 5 of these pistolettes? Well, I'm going to tell you, one little note too, just before I move on with this. If you ever watch one of these shows on that show on that channel, and it's a local restaurant, wait a couple of weeks to go. Because the last time we saw one, it was on Saturday, so we went Sunday afternoon, and they had nothing left. They got cleaned out on Saturday. Evidently other people watch that channel too. So, but anyway, so when I was in formation, we had one of our instructors that came up, and we started in homiletics, And he came out one day and he was dressed kind of as an Arab. He had robes on and all of this stuff. Not an Arab, but robes. And he started talking, and he was talking about this gospel. And as he was talking, he kept reaching into the robe, and he had bags on like purses underneath the robe and pockets in the robe. And he started pulling all kind of food out. And then he made the statement, and he says, well, what was the greater miracle? That Jesus fed the 5,000 on 5 loaves and 2 fish? Or that Jesus was able to motivate the people to share the food that they had? Well, I was a student, so I couldn't say anything. I didn't feel comfortable with what he said, right? But the greater miracle is anything that Jesus did. You see, we can't explain off a miracle. That's why it's a miracle. Jesus fed all these people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. There's no other way around it. Jesus is God, not a motivational speaker. And besides, if you look back in the Gospels, these people had followed him for a couple of days. They didn't have any food. So there was no sharing. It was that Jesus fed them with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. That is the miracle. That is what we have to believe. That is what the gospel tells us. But this week, and this was one of those weeks, right? We all have one of those weeks where everything seems to be piling up. Everything is confused. I took 2 days off, and it's going to take me 3 weeks to get caught up at work, right? So anyway, we got all of this stuff going on, and I'm trying to prepare a homily, and all of a sudden, something hit me. Usually in the back of the head like that, may say, hey, didn't you ever notice this? And I'm going to say this, that we read Scripture, we read the gospel, we say prayers, and all of a sudden something stands out different, right? Because I never noticed the little boy. We always read the gospel and we talk about the miracle of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and how Jesus blessed it. Now they get picked up 12 wicker baskets and all of that stuff, but we forget about the little boy. Because you see, it was his gift. It was him who donated, who gave of what he had so that Jesus could perform that miracle. You see, if it wouldn't have been for that boy giving everything he had, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and I'm sure when he offered it to Andrew was probably thinking, hey, well, that's not even enough to feed the apostles, much less the rest of the crowd. But Jesus took that small gift from that young boy and performed a miracle. Jesus took that gift that when this kid gave everything he had, Jesus took that and performed a miracle. Just think of what Jesus could do with the gifts and talents that we have. And just think of what he could do with the gifts and talents that we offer him. How he can perform miracles with those gifts and change the world. Yeah, and that's right. Right here in this little community of St. Charles, we could begin to change the world when we offer Jesus our gifts and talents. You see, I always tell everybody, I'm not a public speaker. I always thought that I never had any gifts or talents. When I went into formation, when we got to homiletics, I told the director, I said, if I could skip this part, it would be great, because I can't talk into a microphone. I can't speak in public. He said, no, I'm sorry. You got to go through this part too. Now y'all are stuck with me. But if God can take me with no talent and no gifts and do what he's done with me over the years, just think of how much more he can do with the gifts and talents that you have to offer. Just think of how much more of a miracle that Jesus could perform if we all surrendered what we have. And the gospel tells us that there'll be plenty left over. You see, because God cannot be outgiven in charity. So whatever we give to God, he's going to give us back that much more in those gifts and talents. You see, in this gospel also kind of directs us to know that Jesus Christ was going to perform that miracle with his body and blood when he gave us the Eucharist. And he's been feeding us with the Eucharist for over 2,000 years, with his body, blood, soul, and divinity. So you see, if we believe that miracle, we believe this miracle. That he fed the 5,000 or 10,000 or 15,000, whatever it was, with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The simple gift of that young boy. And after yesterday's homily, somebody told me that when he was going to E.D. White, one of the brothers used to tell him when that gospel came up, he said that young boy had more faith than any of the disciples that day. Because he gave of what he had. And Jesus performed a miracle. So just imagine if we could surrender, if we could give of what we have. Not waiting until we have enough. Not waiting until we have more. Usually when we talk to someone about becoming a deacon, they'll always tell you, some of the times you hear that thing about, I thought about it, but I'm going to wait till I retire. Well, God doesn't want you to be a deacon. God doesn't want you to wait. He wants you to trust him. He wants you to surrender and to give whatever you have so that he can perform miracles. Are we willing to sacrifice? Are we willing to surrender, knowing that God cannot be outgiven in charity? Can we listen to today's gospel and listen and follow the lead of that young boy and give that gift to Jesus and allow him to perform a miracle?